Hi, this is Bob Weiss. I'm the host of Shakin' Your World. Cheers.
Welcome home. Yet another episode at Shakers. Today we are privileged to have Dr. Destruction in the house. Dr. Destruction, of course, is well known and regarded for his Crimson Theater and his broadcasting on WLIP. As I like to say, the cold sore on the lip of the Midwest. Here we are, Doctor. Welcome to Shakers.
It's great to be here. I finally got to see the place, and I'm very excited. And this is so up my alley. It's perfect. I really am so happy to be here. I'm happy to be up in Milwaukee, back in Milwaukee. The program, my Crimson Theater, did run here for a good stretch. I think we made it 15 years before the local access station folded, and that's sad. But we had a lot of history in Milwaukee. We did some crazy things up here, you know.
I've heard those things, and by the way, I can see the impact upon you because you're looking a little pale and gaunt there right now. You should get a little sunshine.
Well, you know, they're hanging out at the goth bars.
The goth bars.
You know those goth girls.
Gotta love those goth girls.
Absolutely.
So, Doctor, where do you want to go with this thing? I mean, there's so much we can talk about. We can talk about goth, we can talk about paranormal, we can talk about music, we can talk about all sorts of crazy.
Well, I think we could talk about all of it at some point. Music kind of rings the bell because so much of my growing up in the music scene was at Milwaukee's music scene and playing a lot of the clubs up here. I don't know how I did it or how it happened, but very early on in one of my punk bands, I managed to get us booked at the Starship, where incredible things were happening at that time. All the bands that mattered the most to me, like The Damned, The Cramps, The Dead Boys. Then there was the famous Plasmatics incident.
Man, that was the epicenter of the punk scene.
Yes,
that was something. Yeah.
That it really was, and I'm so happy. I just don't know how I fell into getting us booked there in between while all those other bands were going on. And then Milwaukee was always like my little New York to me. And Johnny Thunders came through a couple of times. That was huge. And the Lord's New Church at Papagayos. And that turned into a fracas because we brought Beautiful Bert with us. And Beautiful Bert, we went to a friend's house, and they started drinking Bloody Marys. And I looked around, and there was this white shag carpet. And I thought, oh, what can go wrong? And it did. Beautiful Bert got too drunk, spilled the Bloody Mary on the white shag carpet. We ended up at Papagayos, and there's a band called the American Girls opening up for the Lords in the New Church. And one of the girls signals Bert like this. Next thing you know, he's on the stage. Security's trying to tackle him. He bumps his shoulder into the PA column, knocks the whole thing on the ground, and he gets kicked out. And then I'm like, well, sorry, we brought him up there, but I'm not missing the Lords in the New Church because you knocked the PA over. It's a good thing somebody was underneath the thing because they would have killed him. And next thing you know, there's fire engines all over outside the place, which we later found that Bert thought someone was chasing him, so he pulled the fire alarm. Beautiful. His real name is Brian Scott Phillips, and he was a great friend, and he made the scene so much fun no matter what, just stuff like that happening. And yeah, a lot of good memories of my early 20s, mid 20s in Milwaukee. I just even some of the just basic corner bars up here are a lot of fun. And Milwaukee was like I said, that was like my New York to me. I know my friends first brought me up here. I just got my license, and none of my older friends drove for whatever reason. So they get me to drive up here for, it was the Tubes at the Oriental.
Wow.
And I when you start coming into Milwaukee and the highway's 100 feet in the air or probably more, I was freaking out. I didn't know where I was going, and then we got lost on the way back. Later I found out they just didn't want to go home, so they just kept misdirecting me as I but after that experience, it made me stronger, and I started coming up here on my own then.
Did you ever work with Scary Joe doing sound? Joe Scary, used to call him Scary Joe. He's now a big muck with QVC, does sound all over the world, but he did all the clubs that you're at. He get music and he gets sound from at different times.
Yeah, I probably don't remember. Okay. Yeah, I don't remember if sound guys don't go out of their way sometimes to introduce themselves, and I just try to be, what level do you want me at? I used to get yelled at for playing too loud, of course. but certainly Milwaukee, it's like no other to me, and it was great to have the Crimson Theater on up here. We had quite a bit of fans, and basically the last few things that I actually did up here was playing at the Metal Grill that got shut down, and Chuck Madison was bringing me up here. I don't know if you noticed that name or not. He tried to rebuild my reputation. Somebody was trashing me pretty bad up here for a while, but that's how it goes. That's how it can be in the entertainment business.
So when did you start as Dr. Destruction?
Well, that's a long story, or a short story. I used to sign drawings as Dr. W, which is interesting because they don't really match up. But when I was in the punk bands, everybody had a name. Mine was Dale Destruction. And I got the name Destruction because things got destroyed in my path. I was very self-destructive, very negative, all of that. I had to walk away from that, but I kept the name. I got to a point where I started experiencing blind optimism, and I had to move away from the cutters and the people that were just, getting too depressive. So I kept the name as Dale Destruction, and for years and then I started the first kind of goth band in the area in '84. We didn't even know the name goth yet. We just were horror rock, or there was the Cramps and Bauhaus and a few others. The Damned always had that imagery. So that once I got into that with the dark side of it, I stayed with that. I had the band Die Monster Die in multiple forms. I think it kind of peaked in '89. We had a female singer, and her name is Jennifer, and she just embodied the female goth. She had a vibe, and we managed to get in the studio and capture that. So that was kind of a peak of that, and then several other bands started using that same name because it's a Roger Corman film. So that went on for a while, but now we come to the point where I tried doing the horror hosting thing myself. It wouldn't have been Dr. Destruction though. It was going to be a mask character, but the lady running the station was very Christian, and she sabotaged me. That and the ex-wife sabotaged a lot of things.
The ex-wife. Well,
but so in 2001, a neighborhood friend comes to me and said, well, we want to do this horror host thing. I go, well, let's get together and start talking. So it starts moving forward. He goes, well, I want to call you Dr. Destruction. And I said, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard. I wasn't even sure I wanted to have a connection with the Dale Destruction, the haunted houses, all that stuff that I had done, even though I was so well known about it. And he ended up convincing me because he knew that I'd get accepted right away because everybody knew who I was. So that was a smart decision, I suppose. But I had this idea for this guy with a green wig, or Roger be the unruly ghoulie, and he was going to be in a little wooden shack out in the sticks somewhere in a lawn chair, just with one of them bottles with the triple X's on it. I might have to do that character sometime. But anyway, then it came into, you start doing it, and then my first couple episodes, I think I was just channeling Martin Landau as Bela Lugosi, but he says, well, it's too slow. So pick it up, and then it started being, oh, there you are, ghoulies! Welcome to Dr. Destruction's Crimson Theater, and the spaz came out, and then that just kind of, you got to find your character, and
people love a shtick, don't they?
Oh, they do. At the time, Son of Svengoolie was off the air even for a while, or I don't know what was going on, but I built the set. This is at a time when the local cable station is equal to broadcast television, because there's none of all this other stuff. There's no internet. There was internet, but not the way it is now, and for streaming and whatnot. So it was just went over big right away, right from the beginning, probably because everybody had already known me, and that's how it began. And the early shows were really raunchy, bringing people in and cutting up, and just having the time of my life with it, really. And then I started getting people, grandparents with their kids. Well, you're our Saturday night. We watch your show with the grandkids. And I'm like, I thought, that's so cool. And I thought, I got to pull it back a little bit. I got to pull it back a little bit because that's so cool. You're going to actually influence how I conduct myself.
Yeah.
And I still have my moments, but we've done a lot of crazy stuff. I ran for mayor of Kenosha as Dr. Destruction, and I got on the ballot, and I got some votes. It was a running joke before 2004, and then and I actually ran against our current mayor, who I have so much respect for. I mean, he's a real powerhouse. Maybe Mark will bring him up. I don't know, but So that's interesting. I mean, if there's one guy nobody would want to run against, it would be John Anaramian, and I did. But I don't know how. And my cousin was an alderman at the time, and he called up my cousin, I guess, and said, "Is this a family conspiracy?" So I don't know if he took it seriously or not. But now I and the mayor talk all the time. And so he's back to mayor. He was off for a while. Now he's back, and so that was another interesting thing. And I submitted my nomination papers in full regalia, and I got on the ballot. So if you want to test the system checked. They let me on, and that was a fun ride. Of course, you're not going to make it 5 feet in a grocery store without having to spend 20 minutes talking to somebody because you're running for office. So that was it also put me on a first name basis with everybody in politics in Kenosha. That was it. And it still is. That's still the case today, which is really a cool thing, I have to say. The result of that. What would be the word?
Well, you didn't have an option, obviously, because you are the personification of Dr. Destruction is you, and you are it. So I'm glad that you came in full regalia, and maybe I'm looking at that lightly because I've seen you on the radio. Well,
yeah,
we both have a face of radio, and I'm in the studio. That you're not so garbed, but I'd imagine this is probably pretty much your thing. Period.
Well, it's an interesting thing, but I'd have to point out, and this is, social media is evolving in this timeline of the Crimson Theater. When I started out, of course, it was MySpace, and I never had any pictures of me outside of character on there because I wasn't on there to be Dale Womble.
Right.
I was on there as Dr. Destruction. I don't want any pictures of me. I'm trying to make my face look different with the makeup and everything else. So. And then it turned out where you have your real name, and people moved to Facebook, sure. And then they started targeting. The real name thing came first. I think they started targeting drag queens, and they went from drag queens to horror hosts, which I can understand.
Short walk across the street, why not, right? But,
so then now it's become this whole thing, though. For me, it was about the arts, the entertainment. It was about the persona. And now it's politics. Now it's coronavirus. Now it's all this negative stuff. You can't get up, and people are fueling all this stuff that's going on today. And wow, I don't really not want to talk too much about the coronavirus.
All right, well that's the preamble. Let's talk then about the paranormal. How about that for a moment or two? You got a heck of a gig in Kenosha with your entire Halloween-centric production. Mm-hmm. Want to talk about that?
Well, yeah. Well, the haunted scene and the radio, yep. All that's combined. Well, I've been doing I've been in the haunt business for 28 years, and Jerry Smith's Pumpkin Farm is where most of that has happened. The Jerry Smith family, Joe and Amy Smith, and Jerry, the dad, they're just the greatest people in the world you'd ever want to be around. And Rosemary Smith, she's passed on, and she was a real kindred spirit. I will get choked up talking about missing her, but her and I really had an understanding that I think a lot of people didn't have with her. She was an artist. She was a dreamer. She had a vision, and we could talk about things that I don't think other people understood. And that was a huge loss. And just great people, great vibe. And it's a different age group because it's usually pre-teen or teen. Sure. We're getting some of the teens now, and hopefully this year we will. But and we're closed by 8 o'clock. I mean, I'm booming between noon and 8 o'clock. That's the other haunted houses aren't even awake yet. Yep. And I like that, and I like the crowd, and it's been incredible. I'll have somebody come up, and a guy about 35 years old comes up and he's with his kids, and he says, "Oh, I used to come out here when I was a kid." And I'm thinking, how's that possible? Stop, wait, slow this down a minute. But that's another really cool and rewarding thing about doing that. And then the Crimson Theater keeps that Halloween thing alive all year in the city. And I'm very lucky to be able to be the spooky guy on the television late night and the haunted house and all that. And then it seeped into radio. I've been doing radio on and off probably since 2008. I started co-hosting on a show called Mothership Connection with a very talented comedian, Dobie Maxwell.
Okay.
Did you ever hear about the guy in the gorilla mask that robbed the bank here in Milwaukee?
I don't believe I have.
Yeah, well, he wrote a book, Dobie wrote a book called Monkey in the Middle. Funniest story in the world, just to kind of sum it up. Apparently this guy he knew wanted him to watch the bank, just to make sure that if he got arrested, he would tell his mom what happened, the robber. And Dobie got in a lot of trouble. He's lucky he got out of it, but he did. But basically, he tells Dobie in the last one, you know, you're going to love this. So he's sitting out there watching, and here comes this guy down the street with a gorilla suit on and a handful of balloons, and goes in and robs the bank and gets away with it. Oh, I'm surprised that is really the thing that happened up here. But so I was on his show on radio, and I was a co-host, and I was, you know, doing different things. And
Sure.
But he was really sort of the UFO paranormal show at the time. And I was thinking, well, I want to do horror hosts and actors. And so then I started my own show, the Big Top Radio Broadcast, which then turned into the Big Top Radio Broadcast After Midnight, when we started doing the overnight.
Was that on WLIP as well?
Yeah. Oh yeah, my whole career has been with WLIP,
Okay.
and well, that did its run and whatever, and it needed a break. And we always had paranormal. We had a lot of paranormal groups, but it just wasn't like, okay, that's all it's going to be. And that's when we go back, that's the way it's going to be. I don't care what you call it; it's going to be more like the old show.
Yeah.
But so, you know, I did a lot of those paranormal groups, and then the program director, you know, he offered me this new deal, but he wanted to try to keep it on the, you know, paranormal, alien, Mothman, you know, our favorites. And so then I go, well, I'll do that. And I knew I'd end up sneaking in my other stuff anyway, because five nights a week, you got to. But here's what happened. I think we had a little chat about this online, but there was a whole lot of paranormal groups that used to come on the old show that seemed to ostracize me after I started doing a paranormal show. And I was thinking, oh, they would love this. But maybe they took offense because I wasn't really wholeheartedly embedded in that when they knew me before. And I hope that they get over all that. But yeah, so that was a little bit interesting. But I found plenty of good people. Dean Bertram, our Australian friend in the Cabin in the Woods, and he started his own podcast, which is fantastic. You started your thing. I mean, that's great to see. I mean, because I always try to have people on that know more than I do about these subjects, because, you know, I'm a bit of a beginner in some ways. Now I'm pretty soaked in the subject, but you know, there's all these things. I quit saying, you know, all these different, no matter what it is, if it's paranormal or horror hosts or music, there's going to be drama, and people are going to have conflicts about it, and there's no two ways about that. So
People, especially today, are very thin-skinned about what they consider to be their property, to be their echelon, if you will.
Now here's another big factor in the Dr. Destruction persona, which now I'm pretty much can't. Growing up, my mom and my grandma were more like sisters than mother and daughter. They're close in age, but they had this sarcastic side of things, tagging nicknames on people, and just wouldn't accept no BS. Okay, they'd call things out and everything. So I got a lot of that. Dr. Destruction got a lot of that from them. But it also was two twin brothers, Dean and Don Lipke of Kenosha. They're gone on their way now, and they were almost identical twins. I got and started hanging out with them because they like to draw comic book characters, and we, you know, do art and everything else. They're all real crazy into rock and roll too. And they were the same as my grandma and my mom, so I got a double dose of that. But I can't unleash that now because you go on social media, you can't joke about anything anymore. You can't joke. You don't want to say anything political. And I don't know. I've been trying to clean it up. I made a different Facebook page. I'm just trying not to comment on anything. Not because that I have formed such a deep opinion. I just think the subject matter, some of this stuff, is a lot of it's way below the surface, and you really need to think about what you're saying before you say it. But if you are convicted, then you should, if you know what you're talking about. And well, you know, we've seen a rocky road. I guess I wouldn't want to talk about it, but this whole shutdown thing and whatnot, it's devastated a lot of. It got to me a little bit too. I got more depressed than I've been in a while, but I got out of it. I shrugged that off. But now some of my friends that are Renaissance Fair performers and musicians, they're pretty devastated. Their lives are shook up, and I don't know where they're going to find work. Even though the Renaissance Fair is likely to be open next year, I'm thinking a lot of these things too right now with the county fairs and festivals, and Summerfest, they pull the plug. The bands aren't on tour, so that whole mechanism of carnivals and entertainers, that's all been shut down. Everybody's maybe got their bailout money. Some of the bigger sides of those companies might be breaking even by not opening at this point. I think that's more than the scare of the virus, even though I think people are going to be wearing masks for another year out in public because of this social experiment or what exactly happened. I think the part of it that started with me is just not so much about the scare of the sickness as the scare of what the government is doing and shutting us down. So, but I feel for all those entertainers out there that really, and I could catch up to me too.
I've got to say something about that because we've got our house band. We've got a number of performers that have been here for years, and they refuse to play right now. They don't want to play.
I see that.
And it's not just because they're concerned about the virus, but they're also concerned about crossing lines right now and making it appear as if they're unsensitive or insensitive to what's taking place.
Exactly.
So they don't want to be out.
Yep, that's
now,
exactly.
I understand that the large corporations have insurance that Summerfest State Fair, they're protected because they've got plans in place. But the average performer doesn't have that, and you need a revenue source, and they haven't qualified for the PPP or any of that thing as well. So, you got to work. You got to be able to support your family. You got to do something. So I think at a certain point, that just, in my mind, goes along with being an entertainer. Mm-hmm. But I've also been at this for so long that I've seen, back in the day, you got musicians playing in smoky clubs all the time, and if you got no smoke, you got almost nothing going on at one point, right? Mm-hmm. And now everything has become so sanitized, except, of course, at Shaker Cigar Bar, where people don't smoke. They're not exposed to that. So we get performers like, we can't play here because you got smoking going on. I'm thinking, but you came up as a jazz musician, man. You were doing that forever, right?
I know.
And whether they feel that they'll be ostracized by other people and won't get gigs, I'm not quite sure what that is, but it just seems odd to me.
I have a lot of friends in Milwaukee, on my Facebook and whatnot. Actually, people that I actually know personally, or people that are filmmakers and whatnot, and they're sticking with that. It's I think somewhere somebody said that it's gotten to the point now where if you're wearing a mask, you're a Democrat, and if you're not wearing one, you're a Republican.
That's silly.
Well, it is silly, and you know what? I'm a free thinker, so I'm done with going in. Well, you're Menards, you got to go in. Well, you got to do that if you want to do the stuff. But
the entire politicizing of this virus is very problematic to me because that's not what it is. It should only be, as we talked about in January, it should only be about the science of what's taking place with this virus. Reason really should prevail, and forget about all this political nonsense. And then you got the zealots, the outliers on both sides that are just fanatics.
Yeah, well, that's some of my friends that are into politics, and I had a very good conversation with somebody at Mark's Cigar Club party, and he was really great. He was talking about so many things, and he said most people are kind of in the middle, and then you've got the fringe on both sides. So I said then that's the trouble you're going to have then.
Yeah.
So I think I kind of take that to heart. I'm a free thinker about all this, and I'm a free thinker as far as politics goes, and I will make my decision privately in the voting booth, in person, if preferred.
Well, good for you.
Yeah, that's the way I look at it.
And I think most people really ought to be doing that because, for so many years you couldn't ask someone who'd you vote for. It's like asking, how much you make.
Right, exactly.
Right, those were
Yes.
off limits, right? And now people it's the badge of honor, especially of the day. Holy cow.
I'm sorry.
Heart monitor, it's yeah.
Is that getting picked up? I can't get it out of my pocket. Someone's going to blow up my phone.
That's okay.
That happens. It is what it is.
Let's move away from that then. We'll get away from COVID. We'll get away from the political portion of that and perhaps even the rationalization why some people aren't doing stuff. Let's talk about Mothman.
Well, I don't know. Mothman's, I guess he's being seen again in O'Hare, but I wonder if that's just because people are at O'Hare again.
My offer stands, and as I talked about this on your program back in December or November sometime, I got $1,000 up, so you're bringing me some documentation of that.
Well, I did hear that there was some other mist or some other thing was being seen there by employees, they were told to that it was a helicopter, to tell people that it was a helicopter, and it was not O'Hare, not the bosses at O'Hare that told them this. And that's about all I know. It was interesting, very credible source, and so well, where you know there'd be testing stuff at a big airport, I suppose, or certainly if there's a Mothman, and they would have the video or the radar data. I mean, they have to watch for drones. They're going to be able to pick up a Mothman.
So if there was a Mothman who was the Mothman, it is not the Arthur C. Clarke kind of overlord kind of a thing, wouldn't there be more than just one Mothman?
Well, I would think there probably would, where there's any sort of creature. Now, again, this is something that escaped a laboratory. Is this, Jurassic Park? I mean, they put that idea out there, right? Well, we probably already got things like that happening now.
So he's a pterodon? Or it's a pterodon?
No, they're the pterodactyl, you mean? The pterodactyls are seen, too.
Sure.
Yeah. There you go. That would be straight up Jurassic Park. Myself, I don't really know. I know there's some division between the Mothman people that that's not our Mothman. So again, this is a human thing too. With people, they find reasons to argue over stuff.
Sure. They'll
argue over whether your pickup's a Ford or a Chevy. I mean, we're going to always have a reason.
Absolutely.
So I don't really know. I like hearing the stories. I keep an open mind. Of course, it's great talk for the radio. Again, if somebody can come on and I want somebody that can hold down a conversation and tell a good story. And sometimes you get people that are just way too out there for that, or they're just not good for radio. There's a whole nother element there. But it's interesting that there's that many sightings and stories at the time that you're doing that kind of a radio program. It gives us something to have fun with.
Absolutely. All right, let's move into ghosts. How about that?
Yeah, that's a great subject. That's how we met. You came up and you really got it going on over here. And we've had a lot of discussions about ghosts and the weight of the soul. If the soul cannot leave Earth, perhaps, because if it has a weight, the gravity would hold us here. Very interesting. Or if it didn't, the Earth and the sun, everything is never in the same space twice. So if it wasn't that the soul had a weight, you wouldn't be bound by the Earth. You would be in that spot in outer space, maybe somewhere, or who knows what lies in the great infinite beyond is a.
Who knows? But certainly is a lot of fun for a lot of people, isn't it?
Absolutely.
We have continued doing ghost tours here, and as usual, most of our tour takers are from the Chicago marketplace or just nationally, which is really cool for us. And obviously it works well for the bar and the restaurant as well. But I am amazed at the number of things that people actually capture here. Well, I mean, I just mean little Orby type things. I mean things that are moving, the full body apparitions, the sensations, people getting cut sometimes, getting tugged when there's no one behind them. It's fascinating how things cannot be explained away, and they are being observed by a vast number of people. And it's not just the ones that want to come and take the tour and they bring their boyfriend. It's the guys afterwards saying, I thought this is all BS, and now I'm here. And it's like, there's something going on.
Oh, I've had encounters.
There you go.
We've got we have a bus out of the farm, actually.
Okay.
The oldest one that's out there. And a lot of strange noises and stuff will come out of that. There are a lot of other things that happen out there, but
give us something.
Well, there's just when you're working out there, there's noises in there, and no matter how that particular bus has been remodeled over the years, there's a vibe that it has. And there's a lot of good stories there. But that was there when I first started at Jerry Smith's. They had that bus already. I made a couple myself after that, but. Yeah, there's a vibe. So I think there's a lot to that, and what could be interdimensional. We really don't know. There could be somebody watching us right now in some kind of other alternate dimension.
Especially here. But I do think that my contention has always been that essence precedes existence, and therefore, at least in my mind, essence succeeds existence. So when you and I are done with these shells, the energy that's us continues on. Whether you want to call it a soul or a ghost or energy, it doesn't matter to me. But I do believe there's something there, and I've experienced all sorts of things.
Absolutely. I think that carries on to me. I recycle a lot of stuff from my haunt that I build. And I'll come across doorknobs or keys and things that were part of a house that I want to put in. And I think there's something special about that key or that piece of wood or this piece of wood at the table and everything in here that's made out of wood. I really think that too has its spirit too from being a tree. And so I like it if I get a good old flatbed full of a bunch of planks, and I go through some wild stuff that I don't even know what it was originally for. I mean, you've got 25 foot by 10 planks. What was this? But it has a vibe, and I like collecting old doors. Someone will throw out put one of them new modern doors that are junk and throw out this cool. Well, guess what? Guess where that's going? That's in the haunted house. Yep. I'll work it in somewhere. A lot of that old furniture. I guess going back to a haunted house is a entertainment. That's really important for me to incorporate into the haunt. It's the haunted manor, okay? What is that? Well, it's a bunch of cool old Victorian furniture, cool frames, cool suits of armor, all these things that we're actually in the most stylistic houses, but nobody realizes that now because they're living in a cardboard box somewhere, and then they see a Victorian manor, and it's like, wow, yeah. They think it's haunted, but actually no, that's very stylistic and it's art. So a lot of that stuff that gets lumped in. So, but yeah, that's a big part of it. I think in a way, my appreciation for those old objects and incorporating them into a haunted house show is part of it. I think to me it brings meaning to it. It's the way I want to do it, and it's important to me. Probably a lot of the people that go through don't even realize that's a thought. If they have a chance to chat with me, which in many cases they do. I've got my little ticket booth gypsy wagon out in front, and the people come just to chat or whatnot, and I'll tell them these stories. I mean, I've got so many life stories that I can go and tell people, and that keeps growing. And I'll tell you right now, you coming on the show January 23rd and been breaking this Chinese virus story on the radio show is a story I'm going to be telling for the rest of my life, because that was just out of all the subjects that we talked about on the show, we might be lucky if that's the only one that turned out to be real, because otherwise there's Mothman's a real. How are people going to cope with that? Did I send you the little I don't even know if this thing is legitimate, anything on YouTube or whatnot is, but I don't know if it was supposed to be suggested that this was some sort of deep space imagery, Mercury, Venus, and Earth, and that asteroid that was right on top of us on like April 28th. Okay, now if they came along and said, we want everybody to shelter at home, we got to keep the hospitals open because an asteroid might hit the Earth, I think things would be a lot worse than they said it was an invisible virus, and then everybody could be in doubt. There was a doubt belief system with this virus.
Sure.
I couldn't have grown up with all the bands that I was, into when the Dead Kennedys, all that old punk stuff that questioned all this stuff. Growing up with that, of course, that made me, suspicious of this whole thing. And then the numbers weren't there. But if they had to tell somebody an asteroid's going to hit, people would have really been looting and trashing and murdering and everything else, wouldn't they?
Indeed.
So maybe now they got to slowly wean us off the hoax. And I don't, you say it's a hoax, and somebody knows somebody that died of coronavirus. I know somebody that died of coronavirus or was labeled that. But
well, that's the difference all by itself.
Yeah, that's a whole different thing. But the media hype, the Facebook hype, and stay at home. Stay at home. Why was this quarantine so effective that most of you are probably going to be a long time before you go out of the house? Because everybody was home anyway. Netflix and chill on the computer. Nobody was coming out of the house. I see more people walking around under the quarantine in town than because now you can't go outside. Well, now you want to go outside all of a sudden because you were already in the house.
Well, only 15% of the bars and restaurants in Milwaukee have opened up as of last weekend.
Well, again, they want to do the right thing, and they don't want to be the first one, or they're worried that, they're going to be responsible for outbreak. Well, they had voting, and then they blamed the outbreak. Well, how do you know they didn't have the virus from going to Walmart already? See, these things just don't add up. None of this adds up. And it's just hard to write. And I hope they don't pull another one of these things. But look what they've done to the people. the humiliation with the toilet paper, the whole thing. Now the masks are out. For me, it was they took a big furnace out of my place in the basement, and I wanted to make a jam spot, and they're old octopus. They've got sand on the top, and they're wrapped in asbestos and all kinds of. So they left it basically like a sandy beach. So I got my shop vac ready, and I was ready to go clean this all out for a jam spot. I didn't know there was going to be any jamming going on, and so I was like, well, I better go get a mask. I don't want to breathe this crap. And one box of masks was there, and I go, oh, is that because everybody's buying them because of this virus thing? And the guy goes, oh, yeah. And I'm like, oh, okay. And this was before the toilet paper frenzy. After the toilet paper frenzy, people started buying food because they realized, they needed food too. So obviously the public isn't prepared for this sort of thing, or any sort of having your pantry stocked, having enough toilet paper at all times. If the power goes out, that was a thought already. We had a little incident in Kenosha. Half the city went out of power, and it was like January or February, and it was dangerous, cold outside, and they were setting up warming centers and everything. And I thought, if this goes on for a week, nobody's going to be able to. They're going to freak out. Better drink a little water.
Of course. Well, I frequently talk about this. We are so spoiled in this country because we have everything you could possibly want, right? And maybe you don't get it all at the same time, but there's everything that's available to you. But you get outside of the U.S., you go to other places, and that is just not the norm, right? So I spend as much time in Cuba as I can, and there's always going to be some shortage of something taking place. And that's more a matter of the government that's controlling that we want to impress upon the people that we're in charge. So today there's no water, there's no toilet paper, there's no whatever the case might be. But there's a lot of places you go to, and you don't have to become an aborigine. You've got just things that don't exist, right? Mm-hmm. So again, we are so structured and of a mindset that everything is always going to be there for us whenever we want it, and that's just not the way the world is.
Nope, it isn't. And we're lucky we're in America, but we're also we're also very dependent on this system. You go to the store for everything. Sure. A lot of people never hunted. I never hunt. I never hunted. So everything's on the shelf for you. There you go. You got to be a sheep.
Yep.
Where people are. I hope people are going to get a little more down to nitty gritty on this stuff and be prepared for a lot of different scenarios. But our government doesn't tell us to do that. Our local government didn't. When that happened in Kenosha, I was thinking, your neighbors, you better be tight, because you might have to hold down the fort in that neighborhood if the power's off or anything else like that. What are you going to do?
Right.
But no local official's going to tell you to do that. So anyway, I may run for something in Kenosha again. It's knocking at the door a little bit.
Good for you.
Well, everybody should know what it's like to be on a ballot on election night. Everybody should know how that feels. But yeah, this has been a interesting time. We'll see if we move forward here and get open and people are less scared. And a lot of my friends up here in Milwaukee are still like that. And I just don't say anything. People, I guess they got to have you got to respect whatever they want to do. That's their point of view.
Of course.
About getting back out there and playing. Other people, I think, Renaissance people might have down the line. So we'll see what happens in a month or so. If we can continue on. I know we keep hearing about spikes in cases, but that's because it's cases and they're doing more testing. I mean, see, Dr. Destruction does not want to talk about these kind of things, but it's our reality now. And we better be ready for whatever next is cooking up. Mm-hmm. How about is the Democratic convention going to happen or up here? Is that looking good or no?
What do you think?
Well, I heard something about CNN had Turner Hall booked for staying there, and they canceled that.
Huge contracts.
Yep. So I don't know.
Virtually everything is gone right now, and the last thing I heard from Biden's camp is that what they want to do is they want to have this as a virtual convention, which means what's the point of even coming here, for God's sakes? Because you can do that anywhere you are. Right. So yeah.
Well, that's really terrible, because I know we talked about the convention being up here several times on the radio before any of this, and that's a huge loss there. So yeah, the economic virus is probably more dangerous, I suppose, than the sickness itself, unless there's some sort of change. And I really, for anyone that had a loved one that passed because of it, I'm not being insensitive.
No, and you certainly have my sympathies as well. But I think the ramifications of the financial crisis that has accompanied this are every bit as significant or more so, as you just said, than the virus itself is. I think the other determining factor for that with me is that hospitals are mandated to check off that box. They get their extra $37,000 by checking off that box. So autopsy or not, it doesn't matter. Or as the cops would say, 3 in the chest, 1 on the head, died of COVID. Because that's expedient for them, and it just moves the entire process along, and we're not doing that discovery, which we ought to be doing. But
we'll just have to see where we're. At least you're able to open up again a little bit, or
we are. We are.
Finally, I know it took a long time.
Incredibly busy. We were shut down for 3 months, or just a titch under, and both weekends, the last 2 weekends, have been very good for us, unquestionably.
And I'm not a big. Usually, if my band's playing somewhere, and that's what brings me to a bar. I don't go to the corner bar. And I did go with some friends a few weeks ago, relatively, just a little while after it opened up. My friend owns a bar there, and I was in there, and then I was kind of getting creeped out. I'm like, well, first off, nobody in this bar is really into anything I'm into. But it was my buddy's place, so I haven't. I think I've been in anywhere since it opened.
How is Sal's Pizza doing?
Sal's Pizza is doing great. Sal's Pizzas have been a blessing. It's a great mom and pop pizza shop. Sal came from Italy. He's got the big hair, and the whole crew, the young men that work inside there are so much fun to be around. And I started helping them out in January, and this is a good gig. I mean, I've done that and all kinds of odd jobs during the off seasons or whatever. You got to keep the money coming in. And then, of course, the virus thing happened, and then all of a sudden we're heroes, delivery drivers, and they're leaving fancy envelopes, thank you, and the tips just went through the roof, and the whole time, and then everybody's on the scared mask, and I'm like, I'm an essential worker. I'm handing everybody's cash. I'm going everywhere all the time, and if I must have the immunity by now. I might even had the virus actually back in February myself. I had a cold. Just unusual. It was unusual, but it was definitely respiratory. So, who knows? So Sal's has got a great. I've never seen a place where people rave about how good it is. So that's really cool. They're a sponsor of the radio show, and definitely Sal's Pizza Place. It makes it enriched my life.
Sure.
It's very, very cool. So
there's a connection with food and all cultures anyway, no matter what part of the scale or spectrum that you're on, but it's really a unifying concept with people. And to be able to provide a good meal for someone or deliver that product because they can't get out, that's magical, man.
Well, yeah, it is, and it's just great to be out in the outdoors. I'm in the outdoors all the time, with the farm, and it's hard for me to be indoors after that. Especially after a good season in October, because I'm outside the whole time. My cousins Todd and Kent came from Florida, and they had a hotel room, and they were like, they thought we're going to hang out in this little. I go, I got to get out of here. I can't sit in this place. But there's been some good things out of this, I'd say. And you're right about the food. I mean, obviously you do pizza and you have a restaurant and you do a lot of the cooking yourself. A lot of times I hear that you're actually doing that, and that's great. And people want to come into an environment like this and have a meal. Actually, I really reminiscent a little bit. If I was going to try to remake the Green Man with Albert Finney, this would be a perfect. This dining room actually looks like some of the scenes in that. Did you actually see that film?
I did, and the murder and the intrigue at the same time. We're there for everything.
Yeah. I think a lot of that might have been the backgrounds were dark. You didn't have all the mirrors, so this would actually be a better place for that to have filmed something like that. You are a little bit like Albert Finney in The Green Man, a little bit, because you own the haunted.
Alcoholic? What are you saying?
No. Well, yeah.
Did he ever not have a cocktail in his hand?
No, he always had one in his hand. Yeah, that's what I think makes it cool. When I see Albert Finney with a tumbler full of booze, I want to have a drink. It's great. That is one of my favorite. Movies stick with me for a lot of different reasons, and one of the reasons that one does, well, first off, it's just a great story. I like everything about it, but it's reminiscent of the time that I saw it. It ran on History or Arts and Entertainment back in early 90s when good programming was on, and it just has a place in my heart. And I love Albert Finney as an actor, and I love that whole concept. And early, you'll see some early computers and stuff in the sets of that. And I guess going back to when I started the Crimson Theater, we didn't have Facebook and the internet and everything like that. So it was just bare bones. The communication wasn't what it was now. So now all the new up-and-comers of horror hosts, and there are a ton. I think we're up to maybe 5 shows in Kenosha now. But that's always been an internet thing when they can just put their shows on YouTube and whatnot.
Well, geez, let's go back to Art Bell, for God's sakes. What a program he started.
Yeah.
And that was just a machine forever, which launched everyone's career, frankly.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So your new program is going to come up again. So are there going to be like elements of the old Art Bell kind of thing going on?
Well, I think we've talked about that before. As far as Art Bell, these are much different times than Art Bell's times. So, and I certainly wouldn't be able to ever come close to what he did. I don't think. So I just have to kind of go my own way with it. I want to keep the paranormal. I want to keep the Mothman, Fishman, Scott Violet. I don't know if you heard him on the program.
No.
He's an anthropologist that turned cryptozoologist and has been tracking the Bigfoot. And I love having him on the show, by the way. And he's coming to Kenosha. And we're going to kind of explore that area where Ray Parrish saw the Bigfoot on 22nd Avenue, which is, by the way, close to Jerry Smith, Pumpkin Farm, and Petrified Springs Park and Hawthorne Hollow. So it's a lot of real tall bluffs in the river below, which Scott says is perfect for Bigfoot. He likes to walk through the river. And,
of course, what does Joe Rogan say about people who go out looking for Bigfoot or Sasquatch?
Well, that may have more truth in it.
White guys that don't get laid? Is that the...
Well, Scott has a wife, so I don't know. But it is what it is, and we're going to have fun with that. But I'm going to have people like Donald Glut, who recently made a film called Tales of Frankenstein. Okay. Donald's an amazing guy, and I love having him on the show. I mean, he jammed with one of the monkeys. Which one am I thinking of? Not Peter Tork.
Davy Jones.
No.
Mick.
Nesmith.
Michael Nesmith.
Yes, yeah. So he's done a whole bunch of stuff he wrote for comic books and everything else, and he's done scripts for movies and knows everything about the business, and he's great. But see, that's not necessarily a paranormal subject, but that's talking to him is one of the things that I think makes really good programming. And I'm very into film and movie making and the classic horror genre. People would second guess me and say, well, are you into Satan because you're doing all this? And here's the bottom line. When I was a young kid, they had a show called Creature Feature out of WGN in Chicago, and basically what they did is showed all the classic Universal horror films. The original Dracula, Frankenstein. Okay, the sets are almost like an actor. The stories are all from Mary Shelley or Bram Stoker, and then the fantastic actors like Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi, and then the storyline and the atmosphere. It's like, okay, what's going on here is this incredible get-together of art.
Convergence of stuff together.
All this stuff. Yeah. So as a kid, you're seeing that. I'm being overwhelmed by the art and the storylines. Not because these are any sort of dark, sinister, Satanist things.
Right.
I'm overwhelmed by the art, so it just never left me. I've stuck with it forever.
Well, you are an artist, by the way,
Okay.
which I'm sure most people don't know that side of you.
I don't know if some do, yeah.
Okay.
At Dow's Tavern, they do. I was doing a television show for the first time, and I'm getting a scratchy throat because I haven't talked this much in a long time, and I'm going to be talking a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
So when do you start up again, by the way?
It's supposed to be the 22nd.
22nd. Okay. It's right around the
So
corner.
we'll see. It's going to be a little different, like I said.
Same time slot?
Yeah, same time, time slot for now.
Well, now you're in Gurnee. That's got to be a completely different experience than being in Kenosha.
Yeah, a little bit, but I used to work at Great America, so it's kind of like old stomping grounds. I played Foghorn, Leghorn, and Bugs Bunny.
Wow.
Yeah, Foghorn was interesting. I always thought if I could get an old Foghorn, I could convert that into a Godzilla costume pretty easy. It was interesting because there's a bottom half with the legs, not unlike the Godzilla costume, and it had suspenders, and then they put the top, the arms, and the head over you.
Sure.
They had to send you out with a mascot or with a security, but if one kid put just so much little force on the tail, it could knock you completely over because that's how imbalanced that was.
Damn kids.
They've always been damn kids, even when we were damn kids, right?
Yep.
But yeah, it's been an interesting ride all the way around. But so yeah, Gurney's kind of just the drive. Mm-hmm.
So are you going to be 12 till 2, 12 till 4?
12 to 2 live.
Okay.
And then a repeat.
Okay.
Yeah. I think they repeated the 23rd show way too much for a while.
Well, topical.
Yeah. Interesting. So, I don't know.
So RPI, you do a lot of things with Racine Paranormal.
Yeah. Ron comes on the show, and that's really great. Love it. Love all the different groups. He's actually one of the ones that still talk to me after I started the paranormal show, so that was good. But then I found a whole bunch of other people, so I just wish the other ones would kind of come back in. Right. A lot of them are doing their own thing too now, though, so they don't need me no more.
Well, everyone needs everyone, so.
Well,
yeah.
Right. If you're going to have a scene, that's certainly, and that's with the goth community or the horror host scene, which, of course, that's a lot of drama because everybody wants to be the real thing.
Yep. Whatever that means.
Well, I don't know what it means, but certainly being on broadcast, or like I said, when cable started out, that's what it was like. It was the equivalent. It's not so anymore. It's diminished quite a bit. And everywhere that's doing YouTube and everything, they never had that experience of feeling like you were on broadcast television. So I didn't give up when that was over. Oh, I wanted to come back to, I was going somewhere at one point, and we were talking about, YouTube horror hosts. Now, there's a guy who really would blow a lot of people's minds in Chicago. His name's Dick Dizell.
Yep.
He had a character called Count Gordeval, right around the time of the first run of Saturday Night Live. And so he did this vampire character. And he did a couple other characters, but he was also Bozo in Washington, D.C. So he did everything there. So Chicago thinks they got the only horror host and the only Bozo. They're really mistaken. But what's cool about Count Gordeval is once the TV station shut down and he was off air, he started doing internet horror hosting back when it was dial-up. And he was the pioneer on all that, and he's still going today.
Which was not that long ago, actually, was it?
What's that?
Dial-up.
And not in our, maybe not in our world. It depends on your age, but I remember that.
Huh.
And he continued on. He was a guest on the show, and I really admire him for that because he kept doing it after the paycheck coming. And a lot of people won't quit. Will keep doing something without the money. And these horror hosts are all doing it for the love of whatever. And there's different levels of whether they're professional or not, or whatnot. I see some great stuff happening. I see a lot of jokes, a lot of bad stuff. It's like that with anything.
So, what do you see taking place for Kenosha in the next 5 years?
In Kenosha?
In Kenosha.
It looks like a lot's going on with our downtown. A lot of buildings coming down, a lot of plans for moving stuff around. And Kenosha has grown, the downtown, with a lot of different musicians and events happening. And there are some brighter spots now than there used to be. I mean, at least bars that have sort of a little bit of a theme, as opposed to your corner sports bar kind of a thing. But there is a scene there, and there's a lot of musicians. And I think that has grown into something that wasn't there before.
Well, it's good to hear. So where are the people coming from?
I don't know. A lot of people come from Illinois, but a lot of the musicians are local, probably living in the downtown area. We get a lot of Illinois, well, now because they can come to the bar.
Sure.
But, there's a lot of people from Illinois who moved to Kenosha. Mm-hmm. I always call them illegal Illinoisians. And I usually become friends with them because they bring a lot to the kitty. They bring a lot to the city.
Yep.
A good example of that is Kevin Irwin, who played a sidekick character called Wolfgang Screwball. He's a great guy. He's a great artist. Well, he came to Kenosha, ends up buying Frank's Diner, which is like this iconic Bela Lugosi dined at Frank's Diner. So now he's running that, and that's a perfect example of how someone came from Illinois, assimilated, and then brought a lot of good energy to the area. So
You're not suggesting that Kenosans are myopic by nature.
Well, I wouldn't suggest anything. I can see a lot of both sides of a lot of arguments, because there's a lot of people that, they worked into the auto manufacturing business. My dad did. A lot of people did. I probably would have, but by the time I got old enough to, it was fading out. And it's interesting. A lot of people are old school like that. And there's just a lot of people, I guess, that just really aren't into arts and culture the way I am. So they just have different wants and needs, I suppose. And there's a lot of homegrown. There's always been a lot of homegrown artists and musicians in Kenosha that were very turned on and enlightened prior. But things are going now. Sometimes I'll see someone post a picture of the old dirty old factory and the harbor and the old picture, and they'll be like, "Oh, we got Harbor Market and Harbor Park there," which is that's a great thing. I'm not going to deny that. But I look back at that old picture and I'm like, yeah, but my whole family was alive back then, and I could go fishing on the pier with my dad, and when you could catch fish in Lake Michigan,
right, and eat
perch,
too. Yeah.
And boy, he could catch the fish. I'll tell you what.
Mm-hmm.
No, I mean it was almost paranormal. People would be mad they couldn't catch anything. He'd be catching fish. No lie. And one of the greatest stories of all time, my dad's crazy fishing. I mean, it really was something unusual. He had one of his first heart surgeries up here at St. Luke's. Is that the one?
Yep, that's the big one. Yep.
In like 75. And back then they used to snag the schnooks at the end of the September season.
Sure.
Jerky. Well, he said he couldn't do that because his chest had just been busted open back in 75 with whatever they knew then.
Sure.
He comes up with some kind of the hook with a bobber that was underneath. I don't, and they were separated. However, he did it, and he'd just sit there, and the fish would bump into the line, and then he'd get them.
Wow!
And so he still got them without doing the casting and everything.
Wow.
Now, this is at the height of beer can collecting days, and I was, every kid was into that trend, and all of a sudden, he's pulling up beer cans. Cone tops, all these, and I'm getting, my collection looks amazing, but it was a trick because one side would be rusted out completely, the other side would be perfect, so you'd have to put the perfect side out. But I had all these cool cans at the height of beer can collecting. What's the chances of that? Pretty amazing. And then one day I think I got a little bit older and was bored, and I got a lot of full cans of beer here. There they went. Yeah, my voice is getting bad. I don't know. There's been a lot of little things like that in life that make it just on the positive special.
Sure.
I wonder some people are with blinders and on so much that they don't look for the little subtleties.
I think most people today, most people, at least in America. So if you could have a conversation with someone, anyone throughout history, who would that be?
Oh, that's... No, Bela Lugosi probably pops into mind, or Johnny Thunders if he would have been still around. There's a lot of people that I would like to talk to, I suppose. Bela Lugosi probably, just because. Mm-hmm. That would be great.
Cool.
Vincent Price, I mean.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Any of those guys, the 30s and 40s, and just masters of the craft.
Oh yeah, and Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee, that
Sure.
whole era too.
Sure.
So, but if it was modern day, maybe I'd like to talk to maybe Johnny Depp or Tim Burton. I love Tim Burton's work. I think Johnny Depp the public can be so fickle, and he's a prime example of a fickle public. And he's done a lot of, what was that? What was the movie about Whitey Bulger that he did? It was this gangster, yeah. And I thought he should have got an Academy Award for this this role he played. Black Mass, that's what I think it was called. So, yeah, but there's a lot of them. Hopefully I can get people on the radio show, because that's what makes it fun.
Absolutely.
And I've landed some pretty incredible people. And this almost goes to like what your question originated about, who would you like to interview? Because when I was doing the Big Top Radio broadcast, I was getting ideas for a film it never came to be that I wanted to do. But I was thinking about heroes when I was growing up. And what came to mind was Billy Jack, Tom Laughlin, who was quite a character. And that movie, that independent film, just made such waves and whatnot. And I just remember as a kid hearing that, there's this guy beating everybody up with karate, and you might see a side boob.
Like 71, 72.
Yeah, right. So I'm like 12 years. That's, and then you get in to see what the film's all about, and you're like, oh wow, man, this is really got a message here. And it maybe was a little bit of an exploitation film and whatnot, but still, as a kid. So he became like this hero, iconic hero to me. So I'm on the radio. I'm like, well, I want to get Tom Laughlin on the show. And so there's this Tom Laughlin store, and I call it, and this old guy answers. And I said, well, I want to do this interview. Well, what station are you on? Whatnot. Well, I'll talk to so-and-so. And then I hear nothing. Call back again. I think it was like 3 times that I called. And he would ask me questions. And then why do you want to do it? And I told the person on the phone, because when I was a kid, there was a hero, and I'm doing this radio show. So finally he says to me, well, I'm going to have you contact this woman. And I believe it was his daughter, Tom Laughlin's daughter. And it got set up, and he got on the air, and I got the headphones on. And the minute Tom Laughlin started talking to me, I realized I had been talking to Tom Laughlin all along. And it was great. It was great. And his wife that's in the movie with him, Taylor, what's her name? I'm going to be a loss for names when I'm on the spot. But she was in the background. Her voice sounded just like it did in the movie. I think it might have been the last interview that Tom Laughlin might have ever done. He passed away shortly after that. And I hope I made him happy by, just... I was a fanboy, you know? I mean, totally fanboy on that. So stuff like that was great. I interviewed Victoria Price, Vincent Price's daughter. That was great. Now, this is before the UFO show. I got some pretty decent celebrities on. Steve Conte, who's playing with the New York Dolls and now playing with the Michael Monroe Band. Sammy Yaffa, who also was in Hanoi Rocks and the new New York Dolls and now playing with Michael Monroe.
Buster Poindexter's still alive, by the way?
Yes, he is.
David Johansen?
He goes back and forth between... I got to interview Johansen and Syl Sylvain when they were opening up for Motley Crue at the Bradley Center.
Very cool.
So I got an interview with those two. It gets weirder every time I watch it. Sylvain's been on the radio show, of course, guitarist from the Dolls. So I had some pretty cool interviews. Rob Zombie, that happened at Eagles. And he was probably one of the most straightforward interviews I ever got. And what was one of the things he said? He said, don't listen to your relatives or your friends, because none of them want to see you succeed. And that was cool. So
that sounds like what they say about Alice Cooper as well.
Well, Alice Cooper, he got a hold on his life right early on, and he's definitely great, one of the originals. I got to meet him. I got a picture with him, but I never got him on the radio show. We were trying. Sometimes they can pull strings at the radio station, but I think might be an issue with the current manager or something like that. That's the can we say cock block?
We're back to politics, aren't we?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's just been great. I mean, there's a lot of people I suppose I still, again, like, someone like Tim Burton, Danny Elfman, a lot of people from the original Godzilla movies are still alive. A lot of the actors that were in them. I think if you haven't seen Shin Godzilla, it's very reflective of what's going on with the virus in a lot of ways. It was almost a prelude, which is an interesting concept, because they've done the Godzilla movies in so many different ways. The American ones, no, that's just taboo to me. They're no good. But Shin Godzilla was really something different for that character. I've been a huge fan of Godzilla ever since I seen him burst out of the iceberg in King Kong versus Godzilla when I was a kid. And then when they started reinventing the movies in the 90s, they were so true to the original spirit and Akira Iwakubo's sound scores that just went straight to the heart. So, yeah, I never expected we'd be talking about something like that. Godzilla from when I was a kid to now. So never would have dreamed. Or Frankenstein and Dracula, any of this stuff. When I was a kid, I never thought about it. And I never thought I'd end up being hosting horror movies late night.
I've heard some people talk about in their minds that some of the more extreme serial killers, like Dahmer, for example, had influence that go back to some of those horror movies that were taking place when they were children as well, where people were just cannibalizing people and doing something else. Do you think there's anything to that at all?
I don't know. I think anybody can take anything in the wrong direction. And they might be, maybe he was more into slasher films and that sort of thing. That's not really I like the classic stuff. Who knows? How old was Jeffrey Dahmer when he was in his heyday? Any idea?
Late 20s, early 30s.
And that would have been, that was around the 90s when they found him, right?
91.
Late 20s here. So I think I'm a little older than he was. So I probably grew up on a whole different amount of films. There's a lot of that suggested that people pick up on a movie. They might have other issues already.
Sure.
I always thought that they were people were getting into Satanism over music, or what was that guy, the Night Stalker? Wasn't he one of them? You know, people start taking hallucinogenics and thinking they're listening to something satanic, you know, that's going to push them right over the edge.
Sure.
So I think people probably got it. Yep, Helter Skelter. That's a perfect one there. And I remember that quite clearly because there was a murder that happened in Kenosha, and it was somebody that was on LSD, hippie type character. And this is right around a time that Helter Skelter was the TV movie. And, I mean, that really put the nail in the coffin of the 60s movement, very conveniently. And but this happened, and we had like hippie characters that would put their stereo out in the front yard when they were older than me and with kids. So that definitely seemed pretty scary. Well, then in the timetables, at some point, they release "Got to Get You Into My Life," the Beatles, and it's a 45, and it was their rock and roll Silver-like album that came out. Maybe they thought they're going to try to get them back together or something. I want to say this is 75 or 76. Okay. So I've got the 45, Got to Get You Into Your Life. And the flip side, the B-side, was Helter Skelter. So I listen to that all the time because it's like, oh, yeah, that's the heaviest thing you can listen to. And what was happening is, you know, that we all know the famous fade at the end, and then it fades back in. For whatever reason, my record player picked up after the fade. Every single time. And it did that for a long time. And then one day, the fade came back in. And I was like, I thought I was losing it.
Wild. So would you think that maybe Frankenstein, because we've mentioned this a couple times now, had any impact on Ed Gein at one point? Going to take parts and do other things with them? Obviously not the reanimation portion, but...
Yeah, I think it's something different there. I think there's something different there that went on with that guy and wanting to wear skin and probably having that the kicks of having this like thing that only he knows about going on. And same with Dahmer. Just something's wrong upstairs maybe a little bit, but I don't know if that's really related to Frankenstein necessarily. I mean, now Psycho actually came out of Ed Gein, but and we didn't have those kind of films at the time, but who's to know what went on there? It's just some other weird sexual kick or whatever they get on it, wearing someone's, making furniture and lampshades out of people, at pride of individualism, perhaps. I really don't know, and you don't know who those types are, because I'm sure Jeffrey Dahmer was seen as just this normal guy.
He was a normal kid.
He used to hang out in the Grand Avenue. What is it? The mall? Is that Grand Avenue? Yeah, and then he had that special spot where he wait for boys. Yeah. Because another horror host named Dr. Cryptosis actually knew him. He was a security guard there, so and then of course you do your tours on Jeffrey Dahmer.
We sure do.
He's actually been in this very building.
He has. He has. An odd fellow.
Yeah, that's what you told me.
Odd fellow.
So I don't know what to take of all that, or what causes that to happen, mental illness, or again, or maybe not. Maybe just someone thinks, oh, they're getting a thrill off of this. And
I would suggest the biggest issue in our society really is mental illness, and it impacts every part of our society. And certainly law enforcement has to deal with that portion as well, which creates a whole different scenario.
Well, it's a pressure cooker what we got going on right now.
Is that?
And we have the social media driving issues.
Yep.
We have protest actors, and we have misinformed people that have been bottled up for 2 months staying in the house. Most of them, by the way, were a lot of people. They were scared, and all that. And then, well, the flip switch. I had somebody that I respect his opinion very much. His guy's ear to ground in politics, and he goes, they're not going to just flip the switch and everything's going to be open. And then, as far as Kenosha was concerned, the switch was flipped, and the local, the mayor and the cruiser. Who's cruiser? What's his position? County board executive. Okay, they were attempting to pass something to shut everything down immediately, and they didn't. Someone must have said, lawsuits or whatever, and their hands were tied, and everything opened up. In some places, boom, it went right back to normal. Nobody cared. Nobody believed it. A lot of people didn't believe it. But I think that at this point now, for some reason, we could go to the next level, because if they say, oh, now we got this huge spike, we got to shut everything down again because all these people protested. Well, you're going to have a whole lot of angry people at the protesters, whether they were violent or peaceful. They're going to say you didn't do the right thing. But a lot of these same people that, at least in Kenosha, some of these people that were in the arts and theater and maybe bands that were they're not ready. They're not playing out yet. They went to the protest. So they went to the large gathering of people. And some are wearing masks, some aren't. And the whole mask thing is gotten utterly crazy. They're in the car alone, they got their mask on. Or they're in the store, but their nose is hanging out of the mask. Or it's just on their chin.
It's like wearing a condom when you're in bed by yourself, right? It makes no sense whatsoever. You see them drive past there every day in a car by themselves with the windows rolled up. It's like,
well, now the psychological damage of this thing is going to be the next hurdle to get over, because people are still scared. So we'll have to see if something fires up again. But they're not going to. I don't think they're going to shut everything down again over it. I don't think they could. They're going to have. I mean, what if everybody that wanted to go protest social distancing, if they would have went out and get in the crowd, what would they have arrested them, or what would they have done? I mean, if they want to cancel trick or treat, well, we're going to have a protest. We're going to trick or treat. We're protesting. You're trying to shut that down, or people are already saying, well, Halloween's canceled and everything. And okay, that's a big deal in my life too. So, but it might be different, but they can't cancel a holiday that's 3,000 years old from another country, and it's in our hearts. And you could still do things.
Well, they shouldn't be able to. That doesn't mean they're not going to.
They can't, but they can't really, because they can't stop you from going to somebody's house. They can't stop you from putting a display out in your front yard, which in Kenosha, I don't know how, I'm sure it happens here in Milwaukee too, but in Kenosha, the really big thing has come to these people set up their whole front yards.
Right.
For trick-or-treaters. That's their big day. That's the way they celebrate
it. Set dioramas, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's not just about the kids, it's about everybody.
Right.
And that's a thing that's happened in Kenosha that I think is really really awesome, and I try to go to those things. But see, they can't shut it down. Maybe they could shut down gatherings of people or whatnot. But yesterday, 2 days in a row actually in Kenosha at a sports field, baseball and several other sort of sports were going on. There was probably 500 people in that park. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I don't see how they're going to tell somebody they can't have a haunted house. Or
well, and if not Halloween, right after that is Dia de los Muertos, of course, Mexican holiday is celebration of the dead.
Yes,
right.
I think that should be celebrated too.
Many thousands of years, right?
We had a couple good festivals of that in Kenosha, and then of course Krampus has begun, and I'm all about that. Yep. I think we should have that transition to Christmas. Absolutely. And it makes more fun, more costumes. People are loving doing that. And another one, well, it probably coincides with Days of the Dead, though, is I'd like to see maybe a little more obscure to people is the British Guy Fawkes celebration with the costumes and the fireworks, and they pay penny for the Guy Fawkes, and it's sort of you got this begging tradition, like trick or treat a little bit. And I'd like to see that happen too, because we need fireworks in November.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So I'd like to. I'm really enjoying the fact that there is this thing, Krampus and whatnot, leading into Christmas. But Christmas, at least as far as the stories and television that we all grew up on and love, as kids, it always had that horror element in it. I mean, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer's got the big monster snow beast, the evil wizard, and Santa Claus is coming to town. So that element, and of course the Christmas Carol.
Nightmare Before Christmas. Who doesn't love
Well,
that?
that one too. So that element's already been there. I think one of the coolest things that I can ever imagine is seeing as far as television programming in my life. It was they showed Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer from 7 to 8. That one is an hour, isn't it? It is an hour long. They showed that, and of course you're in the North Pole, so there's castles and snow. So then they follow that up by showing Roman Polanski's Fearless Vampire Killers, and that is set the castle in Dracula's castle, the vampire's castle, is set in the in the snow up where I was supposed to be Transylvania or what. I love that movie, by the way, which has a link to Charles Manson because had her name in my mind now I forgot. You know what I'm talking about? Sharon Tate. Yeah. So that was just a fantastic combination, and that was really a good invention of the vampire legend. That vampire was so good. The older dude, mm-hmm. I should know his name. I always have trouble with names, but he ends up getting bit by Ingrid Pitt in The Vampire Lovers, which is an interesting turn on that. But yeah, that was another great one. All those I ate them up, and then they started Dark Shadows. I was a huge fan of Dark Shadows when I was in 5th grade.
And in the 70s, right?
Yeah, 66.
66, really? Yeah. Okay.
And but that was in kindergarten, so I got off at noon, so I never missed an episode. When I went to 1st grade, the bell rang at 3:15. If I ran home, I might see the credits. And I always say I would learn much more from Dark Shadows than I did in school. But that was a bummer. That was a burn. That was a savage burn, the Dark Shadows thing. But what ended up happening is they started putting on the Hammer horror films after Dark Shadows because they had the audience there, and that's where I got to see the original Dracula, Christopher Lee's Dracula, and all those. The Gorgon's one of the best. And the one about Medusa, have you seen that one?
I don't recall that.
Oh, absolutely, to strongly recommend it.
Right.
I mean, it's an older film. It's the British ones are a little slow moving by American standards, but still, it's one of the best haunted house castle vibes ever. And Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing in it. So.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think Dr. Destruction, this has been a lot of fun. I look forward to having you back as the season progresses, and we're towards the high holy days of both of our existences.
I suppose, yeah. We're looking for our prime season here and hoping for the best.
We are, indeed.
Might have a bumper crop.
Perhaps. Of pumpkins, if nothing else. Of pumpkins, if nothing else, right?
Well, that's...
You mean the Dead Souls, the Nikolai Gogol Dead Souls taking place, right?
I just mean in business in general, but right now we're in a much better place than we have been last year as far as crops and farming and stuff getting planted in the fields. There's been some losses, though, too, because we had one of those torrential 4.5 inches of rain dumped in a short amount of time. That needs to happen, and I've been watching stuff on the radar.
Sure.
And it's been missing us. We could probably use a little rain right now. So hopefully, bumper years are great. It was a terrible year for pumpkins last year. It was a terrible year for everything. We got the floods, then we got the cold, the gloomy weather, which I love, but it's no good for. We need sun and heat, and stuff didn't grow right, and still managed to get through it. But let's hope for something good to come out of all this. Maybe the second half of 2020 will be good.
I think it will be.
Well,
my friend, cheers.
Cheers. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for being here.
It's great. I'm so glad to finally be here.
Cool.